Good afternoon, comrades. My name is Busiso Xaba, the National Chairperson of the PAC. We are on the platform that is hosted by the Ngwane National Liberatory Congress Youth League. We are honored to be on this serious platform. I would request that Comrade Lamini, if you can just open for us in short before we get our guest speaker of today.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks, Comrade Chairperson. Mine is going to be short and brief to say we want to welcome each one of us who has joined in this forum and who is taking part in the discussions or engagements that we are going to be engaging on. In actual fact, even those that have been participating in other sessions that we had in the past, we want to say thank you so much, but also want to thank you in particular for the determination, for the sacrifice that you have made in trying to capacitate or to build the capacity of our compatriots inside Swaziland in the manner that you do. We understand the challenges that are posed by the COVID-19 pandemic with regards to travel and face-to-face engagements, but even though the virtual meetings have challenges of some sort in terms of accessibility and all other issues, but we're at least able to connect some dotted lines. At the end of the day, we are going to be having at least something that we'll have got from the discussions that we are engaging in. And we're all ears today, ready for today's engagements, because a meeting of educated minds such as this one is always necessary and beneficial to everyone who will always be prepared to learn. And learning is a lifelong process. We know, I've always said that, because I'm an educator, I've always said that, you see, education can be made compulsory, but you can never make learning compulsory. Learning is voluntary. You volunteer to learn, because learning then now talks about the change of behavior and the attitude. It talks about the transformation of one's life qualitatively after getting some prepackaged information in the form of pedagogical approaches and methodologies through the education process. So we want to welcome you. We are saying we are ready for today's engagement. Thank you very much, comrades. We declare the meeting officially open.
Thank you very much, comrade. We will then give our guest speaker, and I hope that we will participate. Today we have a guest who's Lunga Mantashe, the Deputy President of the PAC, who will be continuing as part 2 on the dialectical materialism question that we had already touched on part 1. Over to you, comrade.
Chair, thank you very much, comrade. Comrade SG, thank you for your opening remarks. Indeed, you made a very crucial point about learning. Like you, I am an educator by profession, and I recognize the statement that you made that basically means that learning itself is voluntary, even if education is compulsory. But of course, we do want to make it compulsory so that people can volunteer to learn if they should wish. But thank you very much for your opening statement. 2 weeks ago, we dealt with the question of dialectics, and we tried to explain what dialectics are. And I did promise that I will deal with the question of materialism today, because these concepts are different in a sense, even though they are related in an ideological sense. I want today also to call on you to participate and to constantly interrupt in the process, so that I do not enjoy the monopoly of talking, because otherwise voluntary learning will not take place successfully. The best way, I think, to explain materialism is to compare it with idealism. So here there are two concepts that I want to compare: materialism versus idealism. The reason for this is that these concepts are opposed to each other. Both of these concepts are philosophical concepts. In other words, they are concepts about the nature of reality. They are concepts about how is reality like, and what is that nature of that reality. So I'm saying they are philosophical concepts in that sense. Secondly, they are philosophical because they seek to develop a system of thought about reality. In other words, they seek to look for ways to define and discuss existential questions, or questions of existence, or questions about existence. In other words, what exists, and including how do we know that certain things exist. In philosophical terms, there are two concepts in philosophy. One is called ontology, which is the study of the nature of reality. The second is epistemology, which is basically the study of the theory of knowledge. In other words, how do we know what we know, that what we know is true? So materialism and idealism are these two broad concepts, comrades, that are involved in trying to define reality. I hope this is clear, but if it is not yet clear, it will become clearer as we go forward. In simple terms, the debate between materialism and idealism is a debate between mind and matter, a debate about which comes first. Is it the mind that comes first, or is it the matter that comes first? And I'm going to throw this debate on the floor pretty soon, because I want you to engage this question. But I'm just going to briefly describe what materialism means, right? So materialism is the view that we must not look for any reality outside the natural order, the natural universe. We must not look for any explanation anywhere else except in the natural world, which is to say that the materialists investigate reality by doing experimentation, by looking at the natural world, and by investigating that natural world. They generally buy into this idea that causes of things on planet Earth are material. They are not mental. There is no force behind. There is no power behind nature. Everything is the cause of nature can be seen in nature itself. And quite frankly, materialists do not believe that they do not believe in the idea of what could be called the first cause of something. They believe that there is a confluence, the coming together of too many factors to bring about a reality, a certain reality. So materialists, for example, instead of believing in creationism, which is the idea that God created the heavens and the earth, including the entire universe and universes that may be found elsewhere, such as in Mars, etc., they believe instead in evolution. So you can see the idea of evolution being mostly touted by evolutionists, by materialists, excuse me, because evolution does not look for a cause outside nature. It simply says species develop and evolve and change form over time, with the idea that those with the stronger genes take over a period of time. Because of their strength, they take over. Usually, if you hear of the survival of the fittest, elimination of the weak, almost something like that, but not quite exactly. But that's the best way to explain it. So materialists are also evolutionists in a sense, in that they believe in evolution and they are opposed to the idea that there's a force outside. And so you will find that materialists rely on what we can call hard data, hard information. And there are usually debates between them, the materialists who are scientists also, and religious people who also include scientists on the question of creationism and evolution. And these debates are quite fierce because these debates also affect what is taught at school. And they also reflect who is the dominant force currently in terms of what is taught at school. Those things reflect who is the dominant force. And so I just wanted to just make that point, and then maybe to make an elementary definition. Materialism would then refer to hard things, things that we can touch, like trees, houses, the space in which we walk or fly planes, a time we rely on to have our daily tasks concluded, trees under whose shadows we sit to avoid a headache, or which we cut to make wooden furniture, or to fence the yard, or to create a charcoal or fire. So materialism is dealing with these hard things that we can see, things that we can touch. So that's basically this concept of materialism, things that we can smell. These are real things. These are things that constitute reality, things we can feel with our hands and our feet, and feel with our smell with our noses, and so on. So the question then is whether, so idealism on the other hand holds the view that ideas are more important than hard data, or than materialism, or hard facts. So they hold that view that materialism is more important in that sense. Idealism is more important. If you want to look at history, who these idealists are, you will find predominantly in Europe, you will find people like Immanuel Kant, who philosophized about what he called transcendental reality in the metaphysics of morals. You'll find people before him like Berkeley, who posited these ideas of the primacy of thought, the primacy of ideas. And you will find that mostly these people were highly religious. So the primacy of thought, the primacy of ideas, the primacy of spirit. It's another way of looking at what idealism is often described as, is to look at, from a spiritual religious perspective. People who say in the beginning there was word. What materialists say is that there's no word before matter. There is matter before word. And if I can explain this a little bit differently, just to try to explain the point. Materialists make the point that, for example, language itself is not something that is formed by the mind. Language itself comes from the fact that we interact with nature and reality. And within this context, develops the need to label and name things. Another example would be in a cultural setup. We don't wake up with ideas for culture. It is the culture first, and then we develop concepts, and we develop ideas, and we develop thoughts on the basis of the reality of culture and language, and so on. So his point at the point of the materialist is that it's not words before, it's not spirit before, it is matter before. That's, put it differently, they say in the beginning was matter, right? And the idealists say in the beginning was the word or idea. And others even go as far as saying absolute idea. So these are two broad conflicting debates that have raged on for as long as we could remember. I mean, when I say for as long as we could remember, I mean, I don't just mean 2,000 years ago. I mean far before 2,000 years ago. These were ideas that were being debated, in Africa and in Europe, in Greek, in the Platonic period. So these debates are over thousands of years. They are old, but they are still very important in a sense. So materialism then so materialism then, there's a question then that I think is important for us to deal with, is whether materialism determines the ideas, thoughts, or whether materialism is determined by thoughts or ideas. I think another way of putting this kind of difficult question is to ask whether in our mind there are ideas that there are ideas that determine what we do, or what we do is determined by something outside of ourselves. And I want to maybe simplify this question like that and put it, like that, and ask you to participate shortly, because it's a little bit of a tricky debate. It's philosophical, it's theoretical, but we will see if we can use examples to bring it to concretization. So my question to you is whether ideas come first and matter comes last, or whether matter comes first and ideas come last. Put the same question differently. I am asking you whether in your mind you form your ideas because you have a mind, or the ideas that you think you form are influenced by things that are not inside you, but things that are outside you, and that those things that are outside you obviously have deposited themselves into your mind, so that now you suddenly think these are simply your ideas. And so I know it's a little bit of a complex philosophical question, but I want us to try to interact with this question. And maybe to reduce the question again further down to some concrete aspect. Is it you who decides that you want to go to a protest tomorrow? Or is it something outside you that seems to have a level of influence to determine your actions? SG, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, my leader. I'm going. In fact, I'm influenced in my intervention by my reading of Marxist literature. But I want to get down to the examples that we are talking about with regards to idealism versus materialism. To say, at a particular point in time, Karl Marx argued that to say it is the consciousness of men that determines their existence, it's a philosophy that is standing on its head. It is upside down. It has to be put correctly to say it is actually their social existence that determines their consciousness. So that is how I best understand your clarification or description of the two terms. But I want to make an example to say, when you talk about fully developed naturalism, yes, it is the materialistic aspect that comes first. before the idea. But
Yeah.
Oppressors, and if you go back to medieval times, dictators and oppressors, they are pushing the narrative that will make people understand that it is the idea that comes first before the materialistic aspect, because they know once you become too idealistic, you then conquer the mind, because idealism as a concept makes people to be able to understand the world so that they can live at peace, not changing the world. So you are not an instrument or a force that seeks to change the material conditions that influence or affect your life. That is what they will do. They are not going to support a materialistic understanding of the world, because once a person becomes a materialist, it means that person is a pragmatist. He or she believes in practical issues. In Swaziland, currently there is I will say that belief to say multi-works. You see, in fact, as Africans, we believe that. So people are going to sit back and relax and fear to come out into the open and to stand for the issues that matter the most to them, because they don't want to cross paths with certain people because of multi-beliefs. And that is idealistic, and then an important tool of control by the oppressors. That is how I can understand it briefly, my leader.
Yeah, so I want to explore with you some of the concepts that you raised. So you seem to have been suggesting that materialism is pragmatism. I do want to make a distinction between these two concepts. Materialism, so pragmatism, which was pretty much developed by Dewey in the 1930s, is really about doing what works. Pragmatism is a kind of doing what works. And usually pragmatism tends to be a little bit dangerous in the development of peoples and history, in the sense that people start saying, is it practical? It's the same question that usually people ask about socialism. They say, socialism is a utopia, it's not practical, which what they mean is that it does not work. So let's do something that works. I wanted to make a distinction between that and materialism. The second distinction I wanted to make was, so materialism, and this is not necessarily addressed at you, but I've just thought about it. Materialism is not about being materialistic in the luxurious sense. In other words, it's not about buying an expensive car, going to an expensive restaurant, wearing expensive clothes, and so on and so on. Those are so that's not materialism in the philosophical sense that I was talking about today. So usually the assumption is that you can say people are materialistic if they wear certain things and so on, but that's not the kind of materialism that I wanted to talk about today. So that's the story about pragmatism, that's the story about materialism, but you are quite correct about Marx and Marx's view that it is not consciousness that determines our social existence, but it is actually the opposite, that the conditions of life determine our consciousness. And I do think that this question is very important, because what Marx tries to do is to show that the materialism determines ideas, but Marx was not a reductionist, which is usually how he is painted by those who have not properly read him. Marx is not a reductionist. A reductionist is someone who believes that A causes B mechanistically. In other words, it is inevitable, it is unavoidable, it is bound to happen. So materialism is not the sort of thing that says an object, is going to be pulled down by a force of gravity mechanically. So Marx is not a reductionist in that sense. Marx is a dialectician in the sense that he understands that whatever happens and whatever changes happen, or however matter and man relate, in however way those two relate, that relationship is not mechanical. That relationship is dialectical in the sense that matter does determine ideas, but ideas in turn shape matter. The work that is also crucial to understand the point I'm trying to make is the work that deals with what we would call as the interplay, the relationship between structure, culture, and agency. Agency being the ability to think and reflect as a human being, and structure being relations, human relations, and contradictions, and culture being about a system of ideas. So this work is about how how structures determine the kinds of options and many options that we have. In other words, structure serves a materialist thought process. And then agency serves this idealistic side of things, if you like, if I can put it that way to simplify it. So the point here is what? The point here is that there's a dialectical relationship between idea and matter. Matter influences idea, and idea influences matter in turn. The question is, what is the most dominant force at a particular historical epoch? Let's take an idea of Swaziland. In Swaziland, and we're now trying to bring this discussion into context. In Swaziland, for example, if you look at Southern Africa, Swaziland appears to be the only country, and you will help me with others, that has a monarchical institution, and that is run on monarchical grounds. And what that means is that there is a strong relationship between idea and matter, in the sense that culture seems to play a critical role in maintaining the social order, right? So in other words, it's not just that people are thinking these ideas of maintaining their culture. It is that this culture is used to reinforce political power, which is used to protect material interests of those who are in charge of the monarchical institution. So what's my point here? My point here is what you are seeing at the level of culture, you are seeing ideas, thoughts. And of course, what this means is that there are contradictions about ideas. And this is why you are in contradiction with the monarchy yourselves. And we've talked about dialectics last week. So you are in contradiction with the monarchy yourselves. Why are you in contradiction with the monarchy? You are in contradiction for reasons that are hard material. You see, hard material stuff. You are fighting for bread. You are fighting for water, for shelter, for jobs, against exploitation, and so on. These are material issues. These are objective things that we can touch, objective things that we can see. In other words, we can see poverty, we can see hunger, we can see. So if you like, you can say, if you are a materialist, you see war in Ukraine, and this war is a hard fact. So you can't idealize about, about human rights, because you have got these good ideas about human rights. You have hard facts here. There's a war going on in Ukraine, and this war is between imperialist powers on the part of the West and the North, and the oligarchic side. The oligarchy on the side of the Russian, and they are all wrestling for material control. In other words, what Marx would say here is that we should not be thinking about a force outside this material reality, but we should also think about how ideas are used. Ideas are used to perpetuate the state of the war in Ukraine. Okay. And the example I'm already thinking of in my head is how propaganda is used to manipulate. So propaganda is an idea used to manipulate in order to shape the material reality of Eastern Europe. So NATO forces, for example, run propaganda against the Russians. This is happening at the level of ideas. But these ideas are also intermingling with material reality. They have decided in America to sanction Russia, which is the material reality, to sanction Russia. And this material reality is reinforced by ideas, propaganda, sanctions as a material, as a way to make Russia unpopular from a point of view of ideas. There's also, if you look at the complexity of that war, the Europeans, the Western Europeans and the Northern Americans are trying to make the Russians so unpopular that people should begin to form an idea about the Russians. So people don't necessarily hold certain ideas about Russia now, but these ideas can be changed over time. In other words, if these ideas change over time, you might also see them influencing change in Russia itself, forcing people in Russia to rise against Putin. But then there will be other issues materially. It will be who possesses the weapons, who possesses the means of violence, and whoever possesses those things, is able to use those material conditions to perpetuate the status quo. But also there will be an interaction between these material ideas, this material social order and ideas. In other words, finally, you will always have what could be called the convergence, the coming together of idea and materialism, to maintain a particular state of affairs. So I was using the example of Swaziland. So in Swaziland, what they use, the political economy in Swaziland is protected by the monarchy, but the monarchy does not produce means of production. It simply outsources those means of production to business. And in return, there's now a relationship between the idea of a monarchy and the maintenance of a capitalist order. So now what you see is the existence of idea with the material condition of exploitation of the masses of Swaziland. So this is a little bit tricky, but Marx is not a reductionist. So what I'm trying to explain to you is a non-reductionist explanation of the world. If, for example, you are reductionist, you are going to say what's happening in Swaziland is because of the economy. So reductionist thinkers reduce everything to the economy. What Marx says is not that the economy determines mechanically the ideas and the social order. It is that it plays a dominant role in that process of shaping society. I think so this is a very crucial point, that history is not moved. The point they make is history is not moved by ideas, but ideas themselves are determined by the material condition on the ground. Was there someone who wanted to make a point? Okay. So let me try to put up a material condition, a materialistic conception of history, for example. If you if you live in a place where there is a drought is a material reality in that place. And then you decide to migrate to a place where there are greener pastures. And when you get to that place, there are people already living there. That's a material reality. And there you are going to find a dialectical confrontation between those who want to occupy this land and those who already occupy this land, which is what we were faced with in 1652 here in South Africa at the Cape. So that was so that dialectical relationship between ourselves and the Dutch East India Company, that relationship was informed by material causes in a Marxist sense, at least. In other words, Marx would say, including Engels and Lenin, they would say what happened in South Africa didn't happen because there were good ideas. There were simply bad ideas in a white man's head. Or simply because the Europeans hated Black people. That happened for material reasons. There are material causes to the effect of colonialism. And those material causes predominantly had to do at the time with economics. They were looking for expanding markets, and the Portuguese had already taken over Mozambique. And so, to the extent that I'm making this example because it's important to understand materialism and idealism, it's important because when these guys get into Mozambique in the 1500s, they see that there's already a fort built by the Portuguese. So the Dutch East India Company fights with the Portuguese, and the Portuguese is European. They fight here in Africa, in Mozambique. And these guys get defeated, the Dutch East India Company. So the Dutch East India Company then, because it has been defeated in the battle, it moves to the Cape and establishes a fort in the Cape. Now, in the Cape, it meets the Khoi and the San people. And for it to take the Cape, it had to rely on its, in other words, the taking of the lands in the Cape has material causes, not idealistic causes. In other words, the cause is not because there is a spiritual force behind, and that's a materialist interpretation of what happened. It's not because there's a force behind another man's head, a man thinking that, I just want to take this place for the sake of it. There are material causes in that sense. So the ideas that the Europeans have in their heads when they come to Africa, it's not just people moving around the country. It's the same thing with Columbus. When Columbus lands in the land of the Arawaks and the Semiotes in North America in 1492, Columbus is not going there for fun or because he's got a good idea of traveling around the world. Columbus is going there to look for resources. In other words, there are material causes for the traveling of Columbus, and there are material causes when the Spaniard a king gives Columbus 50 men to go with there, via ship. So the causes are material. But the point is, you can't be reductionist. You can't be reductionist because once you become reductionist, you are going to only see economics as the only determinant. And that is not the way of looking at the problem. So the problems that you see also in your country have material causes. Material causes in which sense? Material causes in the sense that there are interests that are identifiable, that are scientifically observable, and those interests are to keep the status quo, the social order, in order to maintain the monarchy, in order to maintain the political economy that has the connection between the monarchy and the corporate world. And so this is, although this is a little bit complicated, but if you take time to look at the concrete reality, you can again say materialism begins from the concrete reality, what we can all see, what we can all touch, what we can all hear, and what we can all, feel. That is to say, exploitation, unemployment, you look at the COVID, global COVID-19 lockdowns. The causes are material. You look at the cause of the virus itself. That cause is itself material. You see, in the sense that you can find the explanation of why we had the COVID from material causes. Now, I think there's a very interesting question in this regard, and that question is whether certain things can be described as material causes. In other words, things for which science cannot account. And those issues relate to issues of spirituality, issues of witchcraft. And I had a conversation with a couple of comrades about this a couple of weeks ago, about, how can we deal with this question of witchcraft? There's no science to explain this kind of thing. It defies science, and logic and so on. And I thought that was an interesting question. And so these are questions that we need to grapple with, because they shape the material reality. And the material reality has a dominant role. And I think that is the ultimate point that I wanted to drive home about materialism. That materialism does not determine ideas mechanically. It is not reductionist. In other words, the relationship between the mind and the matter is not vertical, right? Where only ideas are a product of material reality. Instead, the idea and the material are in a constant state of conversation, interaction with each other. So what this means is that, yes, the economy pretty much shapes most of the issues in society, including ideas, including culture, including our interpretation and our involvement in religion and so on and so on. And you see, that is important. That is important. But you'll also find that we talked about dialectics. And this is the reason why Marx brought in dialectics in materialism. Because Marx refused to accept the reductionist view of reality. To him, reality was not moving from upwards downwards. It was moving in an interrelated form. It was moving dialectically, and it was not static. It was in motion, moving, with ideas contradicting, with sometimes different economic epochs existing at the same time, which is quite interesting historically. In other words, you would have a society where you still had a feudal lord and a capitalist. You see, in other words, you have a material reality that has two aspects within itself. You see, the aspect of capitalism and the aspect of feudalism, and you find that you sometimes have got three realities existing in the same country. which is what has been the case in South Africa, more realities at once. You had on one hand colonialism, and then you had within colonialism, you had, so the political economy was a colonial political economy, but it was clearly also on capitalist grounds. And then you saw with the emergence of the Bantustans, you now also saw a coexistence of this, but you also had a fourth dimension at the same time, and that was the dimension of a sense of communal life. And that was the life that we had lived before the colonists had come in, which is the life of collectivism, the life of living together, sharing what we have, the life of socialism, which itself coexisted with the era of tribal law, tribal leaders. If you like, you can call it a semi-feudal kind of society. So what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is that we should not only think of materialism merely in economic terms, but we should not only think of materialism alone as a concept, but we should think of it as being dialectical. In other words, as being in motion. And if it is dialectical, it is going to include interrelated aspects. It cannot be reductionist. It cannot be mechanical. It cannot be vertical. It has to be interrelated, to show the contradictions and the tensions. You said so yourself 2 weeks ago, that the tensions in Swaziland are not just tensions between two groups. There are tensions within a group, 3-4 tensions. And that on its own also constitutes your material reality, because there are also material causes for those kinds of things. So those kinds of things, it's not just because people are just having a dialogue and disagreeing about words. It's not just a disagreement about words. It's a disagreement about how the world must be materially structured. So those, for example, who are opposed to socialism are opposed to a material reality that you propose. So you are not just proposing ideas, you're proposing material reality. And so those that are calling for for the monarchy, the institution of the monarchy not to be destroyed, are calling for a certain material reality, because that is going to also, the idea of, and now I'm using the word idea because it's related to the material world, the idea of an institution of the monarchy, the idea of the institution of the monarchy is basically the idea that seeks to maintain that particular levels or forms of that material order. It's like the same case in South Africa. The chiefs and kings had lost their status once colonialism had taken place, because then stooges were put in on their behalf in the Bantustans. And then after 1994, some people wanted to resuscitate these ideas of kings. And then suddenly kings have some level of power. And there are material reasons for this. Is because the bourgeois and the black nationalist, narrow nationalist leaders want these leaders, these traditional leaders, in order to use them politically to maintain a particular state of affairs, particular material order. And so the point being made is you simply can't just think about materialism merely as a lone concept. That's why it is dialectical. It is not just materialism. I want to pause here a little bit and maybe to see if there are any engagements that may facilitate the discussion. Chair, I think I went overboard in terms of time. Also, I see it's 6 minutes past 8. Yes, Chair.
No, you are almost right on time. We still have a few minutes.
Okay.
What I just wanted to pick up from what you are saying, it's basically what Cabral says, that people don't fight for what is in someone's heads, but they fight for the reality of themselves and their children.
Absolutely.
While in the contrast, or adding to that, not subtracting, Nkwame talked about the importance of revolutionary theory in talking, then bringing revolution concretely. He says that we act like people of thought. And think like people of action. I just wanted to raise those, to re-emphasize the concepts that you are saying before we give one or two comrades to speak, then you start going towards wrapping up.
Yeah, absolutely. You are right about Cabral when he says we're not fighting, for ideas in anyone's head, because Cabral was being a materialist proper, saying, "Hey, we've got a material reality we need to solve here. People want something to eat." But Nkrumah says, emphasizes the importance of theory. Even Cabral himself emphasizing the importance of theory when he says that liberation movements have a weakness, and that weakness is ideological. You see, so you are absolutely correct in terms of pointing out that you can't be idealistic in struggle. In other words, the struggle is not merely about moralizing and say, oh, it's bad that there are, human rights violations and so on. There's a hard reality that we need as dialecticians and as revolutionaries to analyze and to say, what is the hard reality? So in other words, if you are going to be a revolutionary, you have to begin from a hard reality and the contradictions in that hard reality. And then look at which ideas seek to perpetuate one or the other form of this hard reality, and which ones are calling for, they're putting forth ideas that propose a new reality, basically, which is basically what socialism proposes. Socialism as an economic system proposes a new reality. Pan-Africanism proposes a new reality, both from the perspective of economy, politics, culture, military, etc. So these concepts are related, absolutely related, or they mutually influence each other. They shape each other, but materialism plays a dominant role, and that is the emphasis that dialecticians must put on the question of materialism.
Thank you, DP. I did not see anyone wanting to comment. I had requested for one or two before we go back to DP, then we go back to Comrade Dlamini to close for us. There's a lot of digestion. DP, please, your panting words, then we give to Comrade Dlamini to close for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I must acknowledge that this concept that we were defining today is deeply philosophical, deeply theoretical, and sometimes not very easy to grasp. With a lot of reading, one would come to grasp it more fundamentally. It takes a little bit of time. It is also not very easy to explain. It's easy to define, but it's not very easy to explain, because of its relation with idea, because of its relation with idealism. But I think what I've tried to explain today was the importance of seeing materialism as beginning from facts from concrete facts, hard facts, observable facts, and looking at the world by looking at those things that we can see, things that we can feel, things that we can touch, things that we can smell, things that we can feel like exploitation, things that we can feel like oppression, colonialism, the effects of monarchy, and so on. But we shouldn't be confused into thinking that materialism is about what we can call the main cause of something. You see, materialism simply says to us there are a bunch of hard, real facts which constitute the world. And the world is material. It's got hard data, hard material. And this hard material shapes your consciousness. And I can make a simple, silly example here. A child immediately gets exposed to the consciousness or the awareness of being burned by fire when they touch fire or when they touch a stove. And immediately their consciousness develops that whenever I come closer to heat, I must not put my hand, I'm going to burn. In other words, the hard material reality has a tendency of constraining, of obstructing, of hindering our complete freedom. And this is why this is why effectively we need to talk about how we become masters of the material reality. In other words, we turn the material reality into our slave. It does not turn us into its slave. So effectively, this discussion will require a lot more reading. It will probably require you to watch this, to listen to this discussion again, and to look at other different papers and debates taking place elsewhere in order to develop a rich understanding of it. It's quite hectic in that sense. But thank you, Chair, for allowing me and the comrades of the Youth League for allowing me to come and share this regardless of its cognitive demands. But I think we will become better in it in good time and as we engage in struggle itself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Things are learned in struggle by practicing them. Over to you, Comrade Lamine, for closing for us.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks to the DP for such facilitation. I want to anchor his words to say the discussion that we're having today is a little bit intellectually stretching, and so to get the ideas to perfectly sink into our heads, for us to be able to transform them to practice, we need to do a lot of reading, a lot of engagement on a face-to-face level. And I think comrades here present, comrades from the NNLC, are going to be able to organize some face-to-face sessions where such engagements are going to be organized, so that we can be able to better learn and grasp the concepts. Otherwise, thank you very much. We are looking forward to another exciting experience. Thank you so much. We wish each one of us who has participated here a blessed evening. Thank you very much.